What if time were not as we have been told? What if the steady tick of the clock, the measured unfolding of centuries, were but a convenient illusion, an attempt to fence the vast, uncharted ocean of memory? Some nights, when the wind moves silently over the ruins of cities long forgotten, it is as if the stones themselves murmur of moments yet to come, or perhaps of moments that have always been. History grows quiet here. It is in these pauses that the faintest traces of something extraordinary may linger, shadows of knowledge, whispers of travelers who knew more than we can now comprehend. Consider the labyrinthine libraries of Mesopotamia, where clay tablets bear the script of a civilization that measured the heavens with precise mathematics and charted the course of planets in ways that even today confound our scholars. Some of these tablets speak in formulas so precise, so intricate, that one wonders, could they have been guided by insight from beyond their own time? Some scholars believe these patterns are coincidental, an inevitable blossoming of human curiosity. Yet, the more one studies the alignments, the more the mind hesitates. Could these markings be more than memory? Could they be instruction, messages left deliberately for eyes not yet born? In the deserts of Egypt, the pyramids rise from the sands with a perfection that continues to challenge architects and engineers. Their angles, their proportions, their alignments with the stars, all speak of knowledge that appears almost fully formed. Theories abound, the labor of countless generations, the slow accumulation of wisdom. Yet the silent monuments speak in a language older than the written word. Some suggest that hidden within the geometric precision, there lies a knowledge that transcends the time it took to build. A knowledge that could have been borrowed, or glimpsed from a place beyond ordinary chronology. Even in the distant Andes, atop windswept plateaus, the terraces of ancient civilizations cling stubbornly to mountain slopes. Their irrigation channels, so perfectly engineered, channel water in ways that defy simple explanation. How did the hands of those long-departed people achieve such feats, without instruments we now call essential? Some have proposed that these methods were inspired by observation, trial, and error over generations. But as one stands in the twilight, tracing the carved stone with fingertips that never knew the original touch, it is difficult not to imagine a whisper from a mind outside their time. A guidance as subtle as the wind that carries the scent of rain over dry earth. And then there are the artifacts, scattered across continents, that refuse easy categorization. Tiny mechanisms, carved stones, metal objects of uncertain origin, all buried in the soil of centuries. They emerge, sometimes whole, sometimes fractured, yet with an unmistakable precision. Some believe these are mere curiosities, relics of experimentation, or accidents of nature. Others, more cautiously, more daringly, wonder if these objects might be fragments of memory, or even memory itself, encoded in a material that outlives its makers. Could they be breadcrumbs, left for a future whose time was not yet here? Astronomy offers another quiet, tantalizing hint. Across the world, ancient temples, observatories, and megalithic structures share strange alignments with celestial phenomena. In China, in Babylonia, in the islands of the Pacific, the rising sun, the path of Venus, the cycles of the moon, they are counted, marked, revered. Some insist it is coincidence, some diligent observation. Yet the repetition of patterns across oceans and millennia suggests something more. A common source, a thread connecting minds separated by geography and era. Could this thread be nothing less than time itself, looping back to touch its own reflection? And so, one begins to notice the patterns not in isolation but as a subtle chorus. A series of gestures across human history, echoing as though some presence we cannot see, has brushed against the fabric of the past, leaving faint traces for those who come after. The texts, the stones, the stars, they do not speak plainly. They hint. They suggest. They invite the mind to wander through possibilities. And in that wandering, the question arises, what if those possibilities are not merely human invention? What if, instead, they are the lingering footprints of travelers who moved through time as we move through space? Some ancient scripts speak of journeys beyond the known horizon of the world, of messengers who traverse distances impossible to measure, of wisdom received in visions that defy linear chronology. The cuneiform inscriptions, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, the cryptic carvings of forgotten temples, all bear traces of this strange consciousness. And yet, as one pores over these texts by candlelight, the certainty dissolves. There is no evidence conclusive enough to claim knowledge, only fragments, tantalizing, persistent, murmuring. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the wind sweeping over an empty plain, brushing against the remains of walls that have not felt a hand for millennia. Imagine the silence between the stars, stretching across centuries, yet somehow alive with intention. Somewhere in this quiet, hidden in plain sight, might lie the faintest echo of time's fluidity, shapes, symbols, constructions that hint at journeys across the ages. History grows quiet here. And yet, in that quiet, one begins to sense that perhaps the past is not entirely past. Perhaps it reaches forward as much as it reaches backward, leaving subtle signs for those patient enough to see. Signs that, if interpreted with reverence and imagination, may whisper of a reality far stranger than we dare to admit. And so, the question remains, suspended between the ruins and the stars, what if time travel did leave its marks? What if those we call ancestors, though bound in flesh and era, had glimpses of something beyond the ordinary march of days? The answer, elusive as it is, rests in the spaces where certainty fades and wonder blooms. Here, we will begin our journey, following shadows and whispers, across the breadth of human history, searching for traces of the impossible. In the stillness of dawn, when the world has not yet stirred, one may wander among the ruins and feel a subtle rhythm in the air, as if the stones themselves are breathing. There is a language here, one that predates speech, one that whispers of memory rather than invention. Who were the architects of such memory? Were they merely human, or did they, for a fleeting instant, touch a horizon beyond ordinary comprehension? Take, for instance, the city of Mohenjo-Daro, where streets were laid with a precision that modern planners struggle to replicate. The houses, the drainage systems, the very orientation of the city, all speak of a civilization that understood order, geometry, and harmony in ways that transcend casual explanation. Some scholars argue that the urban design reflects the cumulative wisdom of generations. Yet, when one gazes upon the meticulously aligned bricks, the thought cannot help but arise. Did someone, somewhere, carry knowledge forward before it was even discovered? Did they, perhaps, remember it from a time yet to come? Across the world, in the lands of the Maya, there exist observatories carved from stone, their windows perfectly aligned to track the movement of Venus and the cycles of the sun. Ancient codices, fragile and faded, hint at cosmologies of profound depth, mapping celestial events centuries into the future. Some say these were the product of meticulous observation. Some suggest mathematics and ritual intertwined so seamlessly that the results appear miraculous. And yet, there is a subtle unease in the mind. How could civilizations separated by oceans with no known contact reach such precision in their reckoning of the cosmos? Is it a coincidence, or is it something more, an echo of knowledge traveling not through letters and maps, but through the very fabric of time? Then there are the artifacts that defy classification. A bronze mechanism found beneath the waves near the Greek island of Antikythera, with gears so delicate and sophisticated, speaks of a mind capable of modeling the heavens long before such complexity was believed possible. How did a people without the tools of modern engineering conceive of such a machine? Could it be that their inspiration arrived not from trial and error alone, but from some vision of what the future might hold? Some historians suggest a gradual evolution of craft, yet the machine's completeness, its elegance, and its foresight invite speculation of a knowledge that might have been borrowed. Even more mysterious are the myths themselves. Across continents, legends speak of travelers who moved between worlds, who glimpsed time as fluid rather than linear. The Sumerian epics speak of the Apko, sages who descended from the heavens to impart wisdom. The Vedic texts describe rishis who received visions of events yet to occur. In the Americas, the stories of the Inca and the Maya recount figures who journeyed across mountains and stars, bringing teachings that seem almost extratemporal. Could these be allegories, or do they hint at encounters with entities, human or otherwise, who understood the currents of time? In the deserts of Arabia, inscriptions etched into rock speak of comets, eclipses, and celestial phenomena with uncanny accuracy. The symbols are abstract, almost alien, yet they encode a deep comprehension of the cycles of the sky. Who recorded these signs? What inspired their patterns? And why, across vast distances and centuries, do such observations mirror one another? Perhaps there is a subtle thread connecting these civilizations, a thread that weaves not through trade or conquest, but through the silent corridors of time itself. Even the act of building, of shaping earth and stone, may carry memory. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the megalithic circles of Europe, what if they were more than monuments to kings or deities? What if they were devices, repositories of encoded knowledge, or markers for those who might travel across eras? Some archaeologists note alignments too precise for chance. Some anthropologists wonder if these constructions encode information about the heavens, the cycles of the earth, or perhaps even events yet to come. History grows quiet here, yet it leaves a faint, persistent resonance, a suggestion that the act of creation may have been a form of timekeeping itself. And in the artifacts left behind, the details are often the most haunting. Tools that seem too advanced, inscriptions that predate known language systems, figurines with features that do not belong to any known people. These fragments may be dismissed as anomalies, curiosities, or errors. Yet, if one looks carefully, they speak of intent. They hint that someone, somewhere, deliberately left behind something to be found later, something to teach, or perhaps something to remind. Some nights, standing among these traces, one begins to understand that history is less a straight line and more a tapestry, threads looping forward and backward, intertwining, overlapping. The past may not simply lead to the present, it may converse with the future. And perhaps, in those rare, fleeting moments, it has. What if time itself was not merely observed, but occasionally traversed? What if echoes of such journeys left subtle imprints, faint but persistent, for those willing to see? Tonight, we begin to walk carefully among these echoes, seeking not certainty, but resonance. We follow the traces of knowledge, of construction, of observation, and of story. In each fragment, there is a question. A question that asks us to consider the impossible, to imagine that human history may carry whispers from an age we have not yet lived. And so, in the soft silence of the night, we continue, tracing the faint lines that suggest the presence of something extraordinary, something that might, if we are patient, reveal that the past is far stranger and far deeper than we have ever dared to believe. There are places on earth where the ordinary rules of time seem to hesitate, as if holding their breath. Among the jagged cliffs, the silent deserts, and the misted valleys, the remnants of civilizations endure, not merely as relics, but as echoes. Stone, clay, and metal have a peculiar patience. They remember in ways that flesh cannot. They preserve the outline of knowledge, the faint pulse of understanding that humans themselves may have long forgotten. And sometimes, just sometimes, these echoes appear startlingly precise, as though guided by an intelligence that reaches beyond a single generation, or perhaps beyond a single era. In the highlands of Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the plains, geometric and cryptic, visible fully only from the sky. Scholars debate endlessly, ceremonial, astronomical, or symbolic. But what if there is another possibility? What if the lines were meant to be seen by eyes that were not yet born, or by observers who moved along a path that bends both forward and backward through time? The desert winds sweep across these carvings, erasing footprints, softening edges, yet the lines endure. They are deliberate, vast, and precise, an invitation to wonder, as if time itself had inscribed a question upon the earth. Far to the north, in the silent reaches of Scandinavia, the rock carvings of Bronze Age hunters capture a knowledge of stars, seasons, and movement. Among the figures of animals and human forms, the placement of lines seems to suggest observation, calculation, and anticipation. Could these markings be the record of events remembered from afar, observed not only in the present, but glimpsed in the future? Some scholars insist this is merely careful observation, yet a subtle pattern emerges, the recurrence of shapes, orientations, and sequences that seem to anticipate astronomical alignments centuries before they were to occur. History grows quiet here, but the stones murmur, faintly, insistently, of connections beyond ordinary comprehension. And in the vast deserts of Egypt, the Sphinx sits in eternal contemplation, its gaze fixed toward horizons we cannot fully measure. Around it, pyramids rise with geometric perfection, aligned to the cardinal points and the stars. Some have speculated that these alignments were meant to map the heavens, a sacred observatory in stone. Others whisper that the precision exceeds what should have been possible for a civilization using only primitive tools. What if the builders were guided, not merely by observation, but by knowledge received, visions of patterns yet to unfold in the distant future? Could the hand that carved limestone have been touched by a glimpse of time not yet past? Across the seas, on isolated islands, monuments of stone rise with silent purpose. The statues of Easter Island, eyes cast toward the horizon, heads slightly tilted, suggest an awareness of cycles and orientation that remains enigmatic. How did a small, isolated population move stones weighing tons, carve faces so vast, and position them with careful alignment? Was it merely human ingenuity, or might they have been following instructions derived from something beyond their temporal understanding, a knowledge glimpsed through dreams, visions, or something altogether stranger? Even the written word, that fragile testament of thought, contains hints of this temporal strangeness. Ancient tablets, papyri, and codices sometimes describe events that appear prophetic or knowledge that surpasses what was achievable by contemporary science. The The Sumerian texts speak of the movements of planets with astonishing precision. Egyptian hieroglyphs recount journeys into the underworld, with descriptions of celestial patterns and alignments that modern astronomers can only marvel at. And in the Americas, the codices of the Maya and Aztec reveal cycles of time so intricate that they suggest an understanding of chronology far beyond their apparent context. Could these have been glimpses of a knowledge traveling backward, as well as forward, through time? And then there are the mechanisms, objects of bronze and stone, gears and spheres, whose craftsmanship suggests a comprehension of physics not attributed to their age. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, charts lunar and solar cycles with astonishing accuracy. Some suggest a slow evolution of scientific knowledge, yet the elegance of its design hints at understanding that is almost preordained. Could its creator have been guided by a vision of the future, a fleeting awareness of patterns yet to be discovered? The more one studies these artifacts, these monuments, these lines and inscriptions, the more one senses a subtle pattern, a whisper threading through human history, delicate, persistent, almost imperceptible. It is not a message shouted across time, but a quiet note, a trace, a faint echo, a shadow of memory that refuses to be fully explained. And if we follow it carefully, we find ourselves questioning not only what our ancestors knew, but how they knew it. Could time, itself, have been more pliable than we imagine? Could those who came before us have touched it in ways we are only beginning to glimpse? As night falls and the stars emerge, one may stand in silence upon an ancient site, listening to the hum of the past. There is a strange intimacy in this act of listening, a sense that we are not merely observers, but participants in an ongoing dialogue with memory itself. The stones, the lines, the texts, the machines, they all speak in a language of suggestion, hinting at journeys and knowledge that stretch beyond ordinary chronology. They invite us to imagine a world in which the boundaries of time are permeable, where echoes from the future may touch the past, and where the traces left behind are not accidents, but intentional gestures of remembrance. Rivers have always carried memory. They carve valleys, deposit silt, and shape the lands through which they flow, whispering secrets to those patient enough to listen. But what if some rivers also carried messages, subtle, almost imperceptible, flowing not only across the earth, but across time itself? The great rivers of civilization, the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Indus, have cradled the rise and fall of empires, their waters absorbing stories, wisdom, and perhaps even fragments of knowledge that would resurface centuries later, in forms both familiar and strange. Consider the Nile. Every year, its flooding shaped not only the land, but the minds of those who depended upon it. The precision of Egyptian architecture, the alignment of temples and pyramids, the recorded observations of the heavens, could these have been influenced, subtly, by patterns glimpsed from afar in time? Some scholars suggest that the priests and scribes recorded what they observed meticulously. Others whisper, with a quiet tremor, that these records sometimes anticipate events centuries beyond their own lifetimes. Could the river itself have been a guide, a conduit of wisdom that flowed in more than one direction, carrying lessons from what we would call the future into the present? Far to the east, the Indus River nourished cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Streets ran in perfect grids, and wells and drainage systems were engineered with extraordinary foresight. How did they achieve such urban sophistication? Generations of trial and error explain some of it, yet the precision seems to exceed what might be expected. Could someone, somewhere, have glimpsed the future of urban planning and passed that vision along, encoded in stone, clay, and water channels? The river, moving silently through time, may have been more than a source of life. It may have been a subtle teacher, shaping understanding before it could be consciously known. And then there are the rivers of myth, flowing invisibly through the texts and stories of antiquity. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of journeys to distant realms, of knowledge sought beyond mortal comprehension. The Vedic hymns describe rivers of fire and time, carrying wisdom that cannot be bound to a single age. Across continents and cultures, water is repeatedly portrayed as both a vessel and a mirror, reflecting truths that transcend ordinary chronology. Some insist these are allegories. Others, more daring, imagine that they hint at experiences of time that were not linear, but circular, fluid, and permeable. Mountains, too, bear witness. The Andes, the Himalayas, the Caucasus, they preserve terraces, fortresses, and observatories whose construction defies simple explanation. The placement of structures often aligns with the sun, the stars, and sometimes with events that would not occur until centuries later. Who placed them so precisely, and for what purpose? Some believe these are coincidences, others argue for the genius of ancient observation. Yet the possibility lingers that someone, perhaps a traveler of time, may have left guidance, a quiet blueprint for knowledge that was yet to be discovered. Even the sky above carries whispers. Across the centuries, civilizations have charted the movement of planets, the rising of stars, the phases of the moon. In some cases, these observations are extraordinarily precise, predicting eclipses and celestial alignments long before modern instruments could verify them. The Babylonians recorded movements of Jupiter with remarkable accuracy. The Maya tracked Venus across decades, anticipating its return with uncanny precision. What if these calculations were not merely human ingenuity? What if, in some way, they were inspired by glimpses of what was yet to come, by knowledge that arrived through channels we cannot see, through time itself bending just enough to be noticed by a careful observer? Artifacts, too, whisper in this quiet. The Antikythera mechanism remains an enigma, a machine of unparalleled sophistication for its age. And yet it is not alone. Across the globe, other objects emerge, small, precise, and inexplicable. Gears, spheres, instruments whose purpose is obscured by time. Some suggest these are accidents of craftsmanship. Others suspect they are remnants of understanding that reached across eras, carried carefully into the present. Could it be that the creators of such objects glimpsed a horizon beyond their own age, embedding knowledge as one might leave a letter for a future self? And so, as the sun dips below the horizon and the stars awaken, one begins to see the world as a landscape not just of geography, but of memory. Rivers, mountains, skies, and stones, all are conduits, carrying fragments of understanding from one age to the next. What if time, rather than a strict river, is more like a network of streams, branching, folding, looping, carrying hints of the possible across vast distances of human experience? What if the past we know is only a portion of a greater continuum, and that within its silence lie traces of journeys yet to occur? There are places in the world where silence is a keeper of secrets, and the shadows of the past linger with a weight that seems almost tangible. Temples carved from mountain rock, monolithic statues that have stood unmoved for millennia, libraries buried beneath the dust of forgotten cities. They are guardians of knowledge, silent witnesses to the minds of those who came before us. Some of this knowledge is ordinary, practical. Some hints at a depth that is almost impossible to define, a depth that seems to touch the very fabric of time itself. In the mountains of Turkey, the ruins of Göbekli Tepe stand like sentinels to a time before history as we know it. Enormous stones, carved with animals, abstract symbols, and patterns whose meaning is still debated, rise from the earth with an elegance that defies simple explanation. Some scholars suggest these pillars mark ritual spaces, or early human attempts to organize social life. Yet others whisper, in quiet corridors of study, that the precision, the arrangement, the subtle astronomical alignments hint at a comprehension that stretches beyond the era in which it was built. Could these stones, carefully placed, be remnants of knowledge that somehow reached backward or forward across time? Could they be markers, left deliberately, for those who would come centuries later, to discover and wonder? In the deserts of Mesopotamia, clay tablets bear the script of Sumerian scribes. On them, constellations, mathematical calculations, and enigmatic diagrams are etched with meticulous care. Among the lines, one can detect traces of knowledge that seem astonishingly advanced. Some tablets record events that would occur generations later, others chart celestial phenomena in ways that challenge modern scholars. Were these the product of careful observation, passed down through generations? Or were they glimpses of understanding that transcended the linear passage of time, as if the scribe had seen not only the present but the distant future? The libraries of Alexandria, though now lost to the tides of time, were said to contain scrolls from all corners of the known world, wisdom gathered, copied, and preserved. Perhaps within those walls, knowledge traveled in ways we cannot imagine, whispers of insight from centuries yet to unfold. Even fragments of those scrolls, scattered and smudged by fire and neglect, hint at an ambition to hold not merely what had been, but what might be. History grows quiet here, leaving us with shadows, but shadows that are densely layered, waiting for the attentive mind to read between the lines. The pyramids of Giza, the ziggurats of Babylon, the terraces of the Andes, all bear signs of intelligence that seems preternatural. Measurements, alignments, and symbolic placement suggest not merely human skill, but a comprehension that appears as though borrowed from a horizon beyond the immediate world. Some archaeologists attribute this to the ingenuity of civilization itself, the slow accumulation of observation and experiment. Yet the perfection of these constructions, the uncanny awareness of celestial movements, the repetition of similar patterns across distant cultures, hints at another possibility, that knowledge, once glimpsed, might be remembered, preserved, and even transmitted across time in ways we scarcely understand. Then there are the mysterious artifacts, small objects, carved stones, tools of bronze and gold, that appear fully formed, precise, and purposeful, yet whose creators remain unknown. The mechanism of Antikythera is perhaps the most famous, but there are countless others: spheres of stone from South America, metal tools from unexplained deposits, carvings that depict machinery centuries ahead of their time. What do they represent? Are they mere curiosities, anomalies in the archaeological record? Or are they messages, left intentionally by someone who understood that time could be bent, if only subtly, to leave guidance for those who would come later? Across continents, myths carry similar whispers. The Apkallu of Sumerian legend, the rishis of the Vedic tradition, the culture heroes of the Americas, figures who traverse boundaries of knowledge, who bring wisdom from unseen realms, who teach secrets that will not fully be understood for centuries. Could these figures have been real, or are they allegorical? And yet, in the stories, there is a consistency, a pattern that suggests intentionality. Could they be remnants of those who moved beyond ordinary time, leaving fragments of understanding carefully encoded in story, song, and ritual? Some nights, if one listens carefully, the ruins themselves speak. The cracks in stone, the shadows across a plaza, the faint echo of footsteps long silenced, they carry the weight of memory. Knowledge, it seems, is patient. It waits for the moment when a mind is ready to perceive it, a hand ready to trace its lines, a heart willing to wonder. And sometimes, it feels as though this knowledge reaches across centuries, across civilizations, across the very bounds of time, leaving hints, symbols, and objects for those patient enough to notice. There exists, in the quiet spaces of history, a kind of shadow, a faint line that stretches between what we call past and future. It is neither light nor dark, neither wholly remembered nor entirely imagined. It is the place where questions gather, where fragments of knowledge, discovery, and mystery converge. And it is here, in this subtle twilight, that we may begin to perceive traces of something extraordinary, evidence, perhaps, that time itself has left fingerprints upon our world. Look, for instance, to the ancient city of Teotihuacan. From above, its streets and pyramids form a deliberate pattern, aligned to the rising sun and to celestial phenomena that occur in cycles beyond immediate reckoning. Scholars have long debated the intention behind these alignments: ritual, astronomy, urban planning. But as one traces the angles of the pyramids, the orientation of the plazas, the precision of the central avenue, a subtle unease forms in the mind. Could it be that the city itself is a kind of record, a stone manuscript that encodes knowledge arriving from elsewhere? Some have suggested that the patterns mirror distant celestial events, events that would not be fully observable for generations. Could someone or something have left a guide for the ages, quietly encoded in the very foundations of the city? Far across the ocean, the megaliths of Karnak, in Brittany, rise from the earth in rigid, precise rows. No clear function has ever been agreed upon, ritual, calendar, or marker, but the repetition and orientation of stones hint at design informed by observation far beyond ordinary human memory. Some insist these arrangements were the product of trial and patience, yet the sophistication, the rhythm, and the subtle harmonics of the placements seem almost deliberate, as if constructed with foresight beyond the moment of their creation. Could these stones themselves be witnesses to knowledge that has traveled across time? Even the written word carries echoes of the impossible. In ancient scripts, the cuneiform of Sumer, the hieroglyphs of Egypt, the undeciphered signs of the Indus Valley, there are moments of clarity, patterns of thought, sequences of calculation that seem to anticipate what is centuries ahead. Consider the astronomical tablets of Babylon, recording planetary motion with such accuracy that modern scholars can scarcely comprehend the method. Was it mere diligence and observation, or might the scribes have glimpsed the unfolding of celestial patterns before they occurred, leaving a precise account to guide the generations to follow? And yet, knowledge is not always grand or visible. It sometimes appears in the smallest, most curious of objects. Tiny mechanisms of bronze, intricately carved stones, tools whose sophistication seems ahead of their age. These artifacts hint at hands that moved with understanding too precise for coincidence. Could it be that their creators, knowingly or unknowingly, recorded knowledge not yet accessible, leaving it like a message in a bottle for those who would come after? Some whispers in the corridors of scholarship suggest this possibility, that time is less a river and more a network of currents, and that occasionally, the currents brush against those willing to perceive them. Legends, too, carry subtle traces. From the Apkallu of Mesopotamia to the rishis of India, from the culture heroes of the Americas to the demigods of Greece, figures traverse boundaries of knowledge and reality, appearing where wisdom is needed most. Are these figures allegorical, or might they represent witnesses, or travelers, who glimpsed beyond the immediate span of human life, leaving guidance encoded in story, ritual, or object? Across time, across geography, a remarkable consistency appears, suggesting that someone or something understood the architecture of time in ways we scarcely comprehend. Consider the alignment of temples to the stars, the careful construction of cities in concert with the movements of the heavens, the uncanny precision of ancient calendars. Across continents and epochs, these echoes form a tapestry of connection. One begins to sense that human history, as it unfolds in the written record, is only a partial reflection of a larger, subtler pattern. A pattern where knowledge travels not just forward, but backward, leaving markers for those who would follow. And so, in the quiet, when night has fallen and the air is still, one may stand among these remnants of the past and feel the faintest trace of presence, an awareness that someone, somewhere, has left a whisper. Perhaps it is a warning or an instruction, or merely a gesture of remembrance. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable once perceived. And in that perception, the mind begins to stretch, to imagine time not as a straight line, but as a landscape, folded, layered, and resonant with possibilities. There are moments when the world seems suspended, when the wind carries no sound, when the stones beneath your feet hum softly with memory. In such moments, one begins to sense a pattern not of this world alone, a subtle design embedded across landscapes, cities, and temples, a whisper of knowledge that transcends the span of ordinary human life. Perhaps, if one listens closely, these echoes are the traces of something extraordinary, architects who worked not merely with stone or clay, but with the very flow of time. Consider the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia. Rising tier upon tier, their foundations oriented with mathematical precision, these edifices speak of a comprehension that goes beyond practical function. They were ritual centers, yes, but the alignment with celestial events, the careful proportioning, the repetition of symbols across generations, all hint at an intelligence aware of rhythms far exceeding the lifetimes of the builders. Could someone have glimpsed a future in which these structures would convey messages? Could the very act of building be a dialogue across centuries, a silent instruction, a memory encoded in stone? Travel to the cliffs of Easter Island, where colossal statues gaze eternally toward distant horizons. The Rapa Nui carved and moved these monuments with a skill that defies simple explanation, yet they were not merely decorative. Some scholars see the statues as representations of ancestors, others as markers of territory or celestial events. But notice the care with which they are positioned, their deliberate orientation across the landscape. Could these silent sentinels be remnants of knowledge transmitted not through words, but through form, scale, and placement, intended for those who would arrive far later, perhaps long after the sculptors themselves had vanished? Even the heavens carry a memory. Across continents, civilizations charted stars, planets, and eclipses with uncanny precision. The Babylonians predicted celestial events centuries ahead. The Maya anticipated cycles of Venus with mathematical accuracy. What if these observations were not merely the fruit of diligent calculation, but the recollection of events glimpsed across temporal divides? Some texts suggest journeys to the stars, visions of worlds beyond the present, and an awareness of cosmic rhythms that ordinary perception could scarcely grasp. Could it be that humans were, at times, recipients of knowledge that transcended the linearity of time? Artifacts, too, bear witness to this possibility. Small, precise objects of bronze, stone, and clay appear across the world with designs seemingly ahead of their era. The Antikythera mechanism charts cycles of the heavens with astonishing accuracy. Carved spheres and tools appear fully formed, with no clear precedent. Are these anomalies, or are they fragments of a knowledge intentionally preserved? Could the creators have been guided by an awareness of future discovery, leaving behind objects as silent instructions for those yet to come? Even myths preserve memory in curious ways. The Apkallu of Mesopotamia, the Rishis of India, the culture heroes of the Americas, each carries a story of wisdom imparted across boundaries of ordinary life. They appear in moments when knowledge is most needed, teaching skills, observing the stars, recording cycles, guiding those who cannot yet comprehend. Are these figures purely symbolic, or might they represent witnesses, or travelers, who moved through time, leaving traces for those patient enough to find them? Across deserts, mountains, and valleys, across rivers that have never ceased to flow, there are signs of intention. Every carefully aligned stone, every tablet of observation, every mysterious artifact is a note in a symphony whose score stretches across centuries. The rhythm is subtle, nearly imperceptible, yet persistent. It suggests that time, as we perceive it, is only a portion of a larger design. A landscape in which knowledge, once glimpsed, can traverse eras like a quiet river, leaving markers for those who know how to read them. Tonight, as you listen, imagine walking through such a landscape. The air is still. Shadows stretch across ancient stones. The stars will slowly overhead, as they did for millennia before. You sense the presence of something patient, something that moves with an understanding beyond the bounds of ordinary history. Perhaps it is knowledge, perhaps guidance, perhaps memory itself. And perhaps, if you are attentive, you will glimpse its faintest gesture, a silent acknowledgement that the past is not entirely past, and that the future has already whispered to it. There comes a moment in all journeys through time when the veil seems thinnest, when the silence becomes profound, and one begins to perceive the delicate threads that connect past, present, and future. Perhaps it is here, in this quiet, that the most extraordinary possibilities reside, not in grand monuments alone, nor in texts, nor in machines, but in the subtle, persistent patterns that hint at a reality larger than our ordinary understanding. Look once more to the pyramids, to the ziggurats, to the terraces clinging to mountain slopes. Their perfection is uncanny, their alignments precise, their symbolism layered with meaning. Some scholars attribute this to human ingenuity, some to divine inspiration. But what if the truth is stranger still? What if these structures, these creations, were intended as vessels, receptacles of knowledge, designed to endure the erosion of time, to convey wisdom not yet discovered, to leave a whisper for those who would walk the earth centuries later? Could they, in their silent grandeur, be messages from minds who glimpsed beyond the constraints of their own era? The stars above continue their slow, eternal dance. Across the world, ancient observatories, temples, and monuments align with celestial movements with uncanny accuracy. The cycles of Venus, the phases of the Moon, the orbit of Jupiter, they were charted long before modern instruments could verify such precision. Some have called it coincidence, others diligent observation, yet the recurrence of patterns across continents and millennia suggests a connection deeper than mere chance. Could it be that time itself, subtle and patient, left its own instructions embedded in stone, in clay, in the sky? Artifacts, small and enigmatic, continue to provoke wonder. Bronze mechanisms, carved stones, spheres of unknown purpose, all seem to carry intelligence, guidance, memory. Were they intended as tools or as messages? Could their creators have glimpsed the unfolding of centuries and encoded knowledge that would only make sense when humanity reached a certain point in its journey? The thought lingers, quiet but insistent. What if these objects are not anomalies, but evidence that the passage of time is permeable, and that those who came before us sometimes touched what we might only now begin to understand? And then there are the stories, the myths, the whispers of sages and heroes who appear across cultures. The Apkallu, the rishis, the culture heroes, the wandering sages, they all move at the boundaries of known history, appearing where knowledge is needed, guiding, observing, teaching. Their presence is subtle, fleeting, yet consistent. Could these figures represent more than myth? Could they be witnesses, or even travelers, moving along currents of time that bend, fold, and echo, leaving fragments of wisdom for those patient enough to see? As we trace these lines, through cities, deserts, rivers, mountains, and stars, we begin to sense a pattern, a subtle insistence that the past was remembered, not merely invented. That knowledge, once glimpsed, can survive in forms so quiet that it may be overlooked for centuries. That the world, in its patient unfolding, occasionally allows for glimpses of the extraordinary, hints of journeys that defy our linear understanding, whispers that reach forward and backward, waiting for recognition. And so we arrive at the threshold of understanding, not to claim it, but to feel its presence. The past is not empty. It is filled with silent architects, guardians of memory, travelers whose steps we may only faintly detect. Their traces are scattered across the earth, encoded in stone, text, artifact, and star. They are fragments, glimpses, hints, but together they suggest a reality both delicate and profound, that time, far from being fixed, may carry its own consciousness, leaving traces for those who are ready to listen. As night deepens, the wind carries the faintest hum of eternity, the quiet insistence that nothing is ever truly lost. Monuments, stars, rivers, and stories all whisper the same truth, that knowledge persists, that memory endures, and that time, in its infinite patience, remembers even when we have forgotten. And in that whisper, in that stillness, one may feel it, the subtle, enduring presence of the impossible folded quietly into the fabric of history. The presence that invites us to wonder, to question, to imagine, to remember.